Just love to know what we're doing and why.
Have you ever stopped to wonder why everyone in Silo keeps talking about protecting humanity, but nobody ever talks about finishing the mission? Think about that for a second. Every rule, every execution, every erased memory, every lie told by Judicial, every impossible decision made by Bernard, it's always justified with the exact same excuse. It's for humanity's survival. But survival isn't supposed to be permanent. At some point, survival is supposed to become living again. So here's the question that completely changes the way we should look at Season 3. What if the people running the silos aren't protecting the Founders' vision anymore? What if they've been protecting a mistake for 352 years? And what if Daniel has just uncovered the one truth that proves the entire system has been following the wrong mission since the very beginning? Because if Daniel really knows what the Founders originally intended, then Juliet isn't about to start another rebellion. She's about to finish a plan that should have ended centuries ago. Stay with me until the very end, because the final piece of this theory doesn't just explain why the silos still exist.
The Founders didn't build a single silo. They built 50. Why?
It explains why the algorithm may have become humanity's greatest enemy without anyone realizing it. Before we dive into the theory, do me one tiny favor. If YouTube's algorithm hasn't already reported this video to Bernard for asking too many questions, hit that subscribe button. It's free, it keeps this channel alive. And unlike the algorithm inside Silo, I promise this one only recommends more theories instead of wiping your memories. And trust me, don't leave halfway through this video. Every clue we're about to connect builds toward one final conclusion, and without that last piece, this theory sounds impossible. By the end, though, you'll see why Daniel's discovery could completely redefine everything we've believed about the Founders for the last 3 seasons.
And we are not finished. We will keep finding ways to make our suits better.
Let's quickly rewind to where the story stands. By now, Silo has grown far beyond the mystery of whether the outside world is safe. Juliet's journey exposed that there are multiple silos, generations of carefully managed lies, forbidden relics, manipulated histories, and a leadership willing to sacrifice innocent people in the name of stability. We've also learned that memory itself can become a battlefield.
Memory is our internal biography, information that we've hopped up with meaning to tell us who we are.
Certain truths disappear while others survive. Entire chapters of history have been erased so thoroughly that most citizens don't even realize something is missing. And through it all, one idea has remained constant. The Founders supposedly created this system to save humanity. Every law points back to them. Every restriction claims to honor their vision. Every leader insists they're simply carrying out the Founders' wishes. But that's exactly where something begins to feel wrong. The more we learn about the silos, the less they resemble a civilization preparing to recover. Instead, they resemble a civilization trapped inside an endless loop. Generation after generation is born underground, grows up under the same rules, fears the same punishments, repeats the same mistakes, and dies believing exactly what the previous generation believed. New leaders replace old ones, but the system never changes. Technology barely advances. Knowledge is carefully rationed. Curiosity is monitored. Even hope seems to have an expiration date. If the Founders truly wanted humanity to survive, then why does nothing inside the silos ever move forward? That's where Daniel enters the picture. Most people see Daniel as someone chasing answers, but I think his real role is much bigger than that. Daniel isn't searching for another hidden room or another classified document. He's beginning to notice something far more dangerous, a pattern stretching across centuries. Patterns are important in Silo. The writers rarely hide their biggest secrets inside dramatic speeches. They hide them inside repetition. Once something repeats enough times, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like design. Daniel doesn't just notice isolated lies. He notices that every lie protects the same outcome. Every decision, every cover-up, every erased memory ultimately serves one purpose: keeping the system exactly as it is. But here's the problem with that. Keeping humanity alive and keeping a system alive aren't the same thing. Imagine the Founders on the day the silos were created. They weren't building underground prisons because they wanted people to live beneath the earth forever. They were responding to a catastrophe. Whatever destroyed the world outside, they believed humanity needed time to recover. The silos were never supposed to become civilization itself. They were supposed to become civilization's shelter. There's a massive difference between those two ideas. A shelter is temporary. A prison is permanent. Somewhere over the last 352 years, those definitions may have quietly switched places. Now think about something we've almost taken for granted throughout the series. Every leader, from Bernard to those who came before him, acts as though the rules are untouchable. They rarely explain why the rules exist. They simply insist they must be obeyed. That's strange, isn't it? If someone truly understands the purpose behind a rule, they can explain it. But if someone inherits a rule without understanding it, they defend it through fear instead. That's exactly what we've watched happen. Modern leaders aren't inventing these policies. They're maintaining traditions handed down from people who are long gone. What if they've never actually seen the founders' original instructions? That possibility changes everything. Imagine a message written 352 years ago. A set of conditions. A plan. Instructions explaining when the silos should reopen, how civilization should rebuild, and what signs would indicate humanity was finally ready to return to the surface. Now imagine those instructions slowly disappearing over generations. Not because someone deliberately destroyed them at first, but because fewer and fewer people understood their importance. Eventually, only fragments remained. Then summaries replaced the originals. Then traditions replaced the summaries. And finally, obedience replaced understanding. That's how civilizations lose their purpose. Daniel may be the first person in centuries to recognize that the people running the silos no longer remember what the founders were actually trying to accomplish. And once you start looking at the story through that lens, Bernard becomes a much more tragic character. Bernard genuinely believes he's protecting humanity. Everything we've seen suggests he takes that responsibility seriously, even when it forces him to make horrifying decisions. But what if Bernard isn't protecting humanity at all? What if he's protecting a system that drifted away from its original mission hundreds of years before he was born? Suddenly, Bernard isn't the architect of the prison. He's just another prisoner who happens to hold the keys. That's exactly why Daniel's discovery could be so devastating. Because Daniel isn't exposing one corrupt leader. He's exposing 352 years of inherited misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding may not have started with evil people. It may have started with something much more dangerous. A machine that followed its orders. Forever. At first, the algorithm would have been humanity's greatest achievement. It could monitor environmental conditions, manage limited resources, prevent panic, calculate survival probabilities, and coordinate every silo with perfect precision. During a global catastrophe, that kind of intelligence would have been invaluable. It wouldn't get tired, it wouldn't become emotional, it wouldn't panic. It would simply execute the founders' instructions exactly as they were written. But computers don't understand intent, they understand commands, and those are two very different things. Imagine telling an advanced system to protect humanity until civilization is safe to rebuild. A human leader would constantly ask, has the situation changed? An algorithm might instead ask, what is the safest possible outcome? Those questions sound similar. They're not. One seeks progress, the other seeks stability. And stability has one terrifying advantage. Nothing can threaten a world that never changes. That realization could be the truth Daniel has uncovered. The algorithm didn't become evil. It became literal. It kept choosing the safest option over and over again until the temporary emergency became a permanent way of life. Every generation accepted those decisions because every generation believed the algorithm was still carrying out the founders' wishes. But what if the founders never intended this to last 352 years? What if the mission ended long ago and nobody ever realized it? The more Daniel investigates, the clearer it becomes that the biggest clues were never hidden behind locked doors. They were hidden inside ordinary routines that everyone stopped questioning generations ago. Every silo follows the same structure, the same laws, the same punishments, the same rituals surrounding cleaning, the same carefully controlled education, the same fear of relics. At first, that level of consistency sounds logical. If the founders created multiple silos, of course they would standardize them. But after 352 years, absolute consistency becomes suspicious. Real societies evolve, languages change, customs shift, technology improves. Even traditions that people fiercely protect slowly adapt over time. Yet inside the silos, almost nothing has fundamentally changed. Daniel realizes that this isn't the result of good leadership. It's the result of a system designed to prevent change altogether. The silos haven't simply survived for 352 years. They've been held in place almost like insects trapped in amber, preserved exactly as they were meant to be until someone finally noticed that the clock should have stopped ticking centuries ago. That discovery forces Daniel to ask an even more unsettling question. If the algorithm has been preserving the same society for generations, what has it been using to decide who becomes a threat? We've already seen that certain people are watched more closely than others. Some are quietly removed from positions of influence. Others have their memories altered, or find themselves accused of crimes that conveniently eliminate them from the equation. Daniel begins to suspect that the algorithm isn't just monitoring behavior, it's monitoring patterns of thought. It isn't waiting for rebellion to happen. It's identifying the people most likely to connect the same pieces of the puzzle that previous generations connected before they were silenced. In other words, the algorithm has spent 352 years fighting the exact same battle against different faces. Every curious engineer, every determined sheriff, every questioning scientist, and every rebellious thinker eventually arrives at the same conclusions, because the truth itself never changes. The only thing that changes is who discovers it first. And then Daniel notices something that completely reshapes his investigation. For all of the algorithm's power, it has one weakness that no machine can ever eliminate. It can predict behavior based on history, but it cannot truly understand human choice. Juliet has already proven that. Again and again, she has made decisions that no model could reasonably anticipate because she refuses to act out of fear. She acts out of conviction. Daniel realizes that the founders may have understood this weakness from the very beginning. They created an intelligence capable of managing resources and maintaining order, but they never intended it to replace human judgment forever. Somewhere between the founders' original plan and the present day, the balance shifted. The algorithm stopped advising humanity and quietly became humanity's replacement. Leaders no longer questioned its conclusions, they simply enforced them. And over hundreds of years, obedience became so deeply rooted that no one remembered the machine was ever supposed to serve people, not rule them. If that's the truth Daniel has uncovered, then Season 3 isn't building toward another rebellion. It's building toward a confrontation between two completely different visions of humanity's future. On one side stands the algorithm, convinced that survival depends on perfect control, perfect order, and an endless cycle of predictable lives. On the other stands Juliet, carrying the one quality no machine can ever calculate: the willingness to risk everything for the truth. Daniel doesn't need to lead a revolution. His role is even more important. He's the historian who finally uncovers where the mission went wrong. Juliet becomes the person capable of setting it right. And if they're successful, the greatest revelation in Silo won't be that the founders lied to humanity. It'll be that the founders never intended humanity to live in fear for 352 years. They intended humanity to outgrow that fear and finally reclaim the world they were always meant to inherit.